Confetti Covered Quicksand, Chapter 5, Cloud of Crushed Dreams. I turned 21 in September 1994, right when our lease was up on the Topanga house. The guys started clearing out their belongings, which were few. None of us really had anything. There were 2 fridges, and one of them was so full of smelly rot inside that when Tim opened it to get one last beer, he caught a whiff of it and he jerked his beer bottle into his mouth and chipped his front tooth. The kitchen had been piling up with stolen pow-pow salad bowls and plates, crusted with rotten food. No one wanted to go in and pick through the mold and maggots to claim their plates and cups and things. Everyone just left their kitchen stuff there and moved out. Well, Anthony went in one day and cleaned everything with a clothespin on his nose. He packed up all of the stuff and kept it. I still have some of those mixing bowls to this day. Everyone went their separate ways. Blake moved in with a friend. Tim and Lucas moved out together, from what I remember. And sadly, Sean Peterson died 2 years later doing a stunt on a TV show. I wish I could have told him how much I appreciated his help instead of being such an asshole at that time. Sean was not the only one to die. 3 other people who hung out at the Topanga house with us actually died in different ways within the following 5 years. Young people. It messed with my head for a while. I didn't understand why people were dropping like flies. I clung to Anthony and I begged him to let me move in with him somewhere. He was game. He told me to find the place, check it out, and he would put down the deposit. I found an apartment a few doors down from Missy in a city called Sherman Oaks, which is also located in the San Fernando Valley portion of Los Angeles. I liked that it was close to her. I didn't realize just how ugly the building was, though. I hadn't inspected many apartment buildings at the time. Well, actually, I had inspected 0 apartment buildings, so I just said yes to it because it was cheap. The tenant who was showing me the place said it was $750 a month for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. The living room had some hateful wood paneling across an entire wall and very thin doors that you could kick a hole through very easily. I foresaw that it was likely that one of us would be doing so. It was kind of set up like a motel because there were no security gates. You could just walk up to the front door from a stairway that opened out onto a public driveway. So that didn't feel too safe, but nothing ever really did. Anyway, I saw the place and thought it was good enough, so we had to go meet the landlord so he could run our credit. Anthony was nervous about his recent car repossession, and I had no credit at all, so we started plotting. "Okay," said Anthony. "If he's straight, you flirt with him. If he's gay, I will flirt with him. Got it?" A thin man with droopy blue eyes answered the door with a little dog in a sweater yapping behind him. "Sandy, shush," he said. I looked at Anthony as if to say, "All yours." We came in the house and the dog started sniffing us. "Oh, he likes you," said the landlord as he led us to the kitchen table. He offered us some Valium for having had to deal with that traffic on the way over. We gladly popped the pills as if it were completely normal. Then he went and put on the soundtrack to Sunset Boulevard. I lifted an eyebrow at Anthony as if to say, "Okay, now there's no question." Henry sat down and stared at us. "I ran your credit," he said to Anthony. There was silence. Anthony started to shift in his seat. Henry was just staring at him, and Anthony started to spill. Well, I recently got that repo on my credit, but it's all figured out now." Henry nodded and said nothing. He just kept staring at Anthony. Anthony continued digging himself in a hole out of being nervous. "I may have had a few late charges here and there, but that's because I was trying to get some decent furniture, if you know what I mean." Henry nodded, but there was more of a silence, and suddenly he spoke. "Have you seen Sunset Boulevard?" I said no, and Anthony said yes at the same time. Anthony kicked me under the table. Then Henry narrowed his eyes at Anthony and said, "Do I know you from somewhere?" I kicked Anthony back harder. Anthony fidgeted. No, I don't think so." Henry spoke right over him. "Where did you live 2 years ago?" Anthony stuttered that he had lived in Burbank, but Henry was not listening. "You lived off Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood. I think I do know you." Anthony realized that he had hooked up with our future landlord right about then. I was hoping it wasn't the guy who paid him with a bucket of chicken. The landlord then told us that his dog liked us, so we could have the place. We looked at each other. Henry said, "If Sandy likes you, I like you." We moved into our apartment the next weekend. It was a block south of Ventura Boulevard, where the 405 and the 101 freeways meet. The neighborhood was a mix of crappy old apartments and some semi-new ones. The street was lined with parked cars and appeared to be some sort of a shortcut. Cars were zipping by all hours of the day and night, and it was the location of the next phase of my life. The inhabitants of Sherman Oaks were, again, the young people who had moved from other states to make it big in Los Angeles, but who couldn't afford to live somewhere nice. It was a very busy town, close to Studio City, close to Billy Blank's Tae Bo classes and Pink Cheek's skincare salon. There was a large selection of struggling actors and actresses, waiters, adult film stars, and dancers. It was a lot of people without their families, people who were out there on their own struggling. It was not a happy community. It was kind of like the land of the lost toys. I think a lot of the people, especially the girls, were kind of down because they may have come out to LA to get into acting, but finding that they were not getting parts had to pay the rent somehow. And that somehow, more often than not, involved stripping or adult films. Anthony often bought porn magazines, all types. He came tearing through the door one day with a picture of our neighbors in Hustler. They were a young, hot couple from the Midwest who apparently did a pictorial together. Jenna Jameson, who wasn't super famous yet, lived a few blocks down. A famous adult star now known as Dale DeBone was a waiter at Pow Pow when I worked there, sometime between 94 and 96, I don't remember the year. Not that those people can't be happy, I'm sure they are, but the area in which I lived just kind of reeked of sadness to me. It was this cloud of crushed dreams. Just as I was relieved when I left the British folk, I was terribly relieved to be away from the Topanga house. I had started to fall for Blake, and I knew I needed to get away from him. I still had to work with him, and it was distracting me to the point of wanting to quit my job. There's nothing worse than being a server alongside another server who you have hooked up with and still have feelings for, because the job consisted of a lot of flirting. He was constantly flirting with chicks and ignoring me, and it was kind of like a stab in my heart. I tried to flirt as much as possible too, but I was crestfallen and I couldn't do a good job of it. So my problem was not just that I was heartbroken over the lack of attention from this guy I fell for, but it was also that I couldn't concentrate on making my own money. If something stopped me from being happy and lively, my tips suffered. My ability to survive suffered. I had to think of something fast. I had to get rid of him. And that's exactly what I did. Brody came over to my apartment one night, got really stoned or pilled out or something, and slept over. Blake was partying with us that night, and he slept over as well, just so he could try and hook up with her. He was not successful in doing so, but he somehow thought that if he stayed there with her while I went to work the next day, he could score. I don't know if I've ever been so jealous. He was supposed to work with me that day, but he called in sick. Now, this sounds like a total lie, but this is really what happened, and I am not even kidding. I went to work and played on the insecurity of my boss, Grant. I said, Blake is lying. He isn't even sick. He's at my house right now, sleeping. Are you going to keep letting him get away with that? I thought you were our boss. And he was like, I am. And I started taunting him, saying, you never fire anyone. He always does this, and you never make that move. I thought you had power. I am not even kidding. It was ridiculous, the things I was saying. Even more ridiculous was the fact that he was totally falling for these stupid cliched lines. So he says, I will fire him right now. And I was like, no, you won't. You never fire anyone. Lo and behold, he fired Blake. Just like that. Gone. I no longer had to worry about working with him. I was so overjoyed. The revenge was so sweet, I smiled for a week straight. It was the beginning of a new era, a time when all of the right players come together and make magic, as only restaurant crews can understand. Okay, maybe magic's a little strong of a word. Let's just say really, really fun. It was the fall of 1994. A new guy was hired to replace Blake, and his name was Jack. He was a Latino with bleached white hair, and a baritone voice that sounded like an announcer. He had a vocabulary that was so advanced, he left most people scratching their heads. He was not only well-spoken, but he had a quick wit and was quite cultured. I suspected he was gay, and I don't know exactly why I thought it, but I did. I guess it was when he told me about an Yves Saint Laurent scarf he wore to a family dinner in the correct accent. I was like, okay, girlfriend ain't straight. He tried telling me about his Asian girlfriend, and I just looked at him like, bitch, please. Jack was a little stuffy at first, but I could see that he would be fun once he let loose a little. I walked in one day shortly thereafter to see another new hire. This time it was a girl named Allison Rogers. She was classically pretty with long brown hair that had a red tint to it. She didn't need to wear much makeup. She was natural and clean-looking. She looked a lot like an olive-skinned Natalie Wood, whom I always adored, but a Natalie Wood who could fight. Real cute with sort of a tough edge. It seemed like she would fuck me up if I crossed her. I sensed the toughness about her by the way she carried her keys in her back pocket. I stared at those keys for a couple of shifts. She was in the pow-pow uniform, so I couldn't get any clues off of her style or her wardrobe, the typical way one would read another person. All I had were those keys. The keychain was wrapped with duct tape, and there was a bottle opener alongside it. Okay, she was a guy's girl, a beer drinker, probably mellow, low-key. She didn't talk much, so I didn't know what to make of her. I thought for sure she would hate me because she was not friendly toward me, and she made no move to be social with me. I didn't know if I could crack her. There was always a certain type of girl who just couldn't stand obnoxious people like me. One day, Michael Jackson's Don't Stop Till You Get Enough was playing. Jack and I were sitting in the takeout area, and I did an imitation of the song. Allison heard me and laughed so hard she almost shattered the glass wall next to us. I felt good that she thought I was funny. She warmed to me a lot that day, and she kind of listened to Jack and me for entertainment purposes. Allison was slow to reveal herself. She preferred to sit back and watch the craziness, so I still wasn't sure if we would get any closer. One night soon thereafter, I had a party at my apartment. I invited everyone from work and insisted Jack and Allison come. I thrusted some strong drinks into their hands and slurred at them to come on in and join the game I had created. I had a twister mat on the floor and decided to combine it with Truth or Dare for the ultimate drinking game. They were good sports about it. And if I recall correctly, Allison got to see one of our cute coworkers' balls. By the end of the night, Jack was crawling on the ground, laughing with the pink frozen drink in his hand. Anthony loved him. Once they started clubbing together, Jack felt more comfortable about admitting he was gay. He was not interested in Anthony romantically, but he loved going out with him because it was fun. Anthony and I started to joke that we were a professional service that yanked people out of the closet. We all started to go out together. One night, we proceeded to get shit-faced drunk and get into Anthony's car with our beers. Anthony drove us toward 4 pylons in the street and screeched to a halt when he realized he was about to crash into them. He decided he wanted to go around them. He pulled up onto the sidewalk, crashed through somebody's potted plants, and right when he was driving off the curb onto the street on the other side of the pylons, a cop's light flashed, and a siren made one little woo-woo sound. We all giggled. The cop walked up to Anthony and saw all of us smash in the back with open beers and no seatbelts, sitting on each other's laps. Anthony's headlight was out, and there were a million other things wrong with the clunker he was driving. The cop sighed and shook his head, probably thinking that it would take an entire night to list all of the shit wrong with the situation. There could not have been enough room on a ticket. Just get out of here, he told us to go home, and then he left. Another night, I went out with Jack, Anthony, and a nice girl from work. One of the guys was invited to some crazy porn party up in the hills, and we wanted to see what it was all about. We picked up some booze, and we headed up Coldwater Canyon, or was it down Coldwater Canyon, singing along to the radio. We got out of the car at some place that was overlooking a cliff. We started walking toward the doors that had loud music pulsating through them. Jack and the girl cracked their beers and started to bring them to their lips, and we heard, "Freeze! Police!" Some plainclothes cop came over, showed a badge, and wrote Jack a ticket for drinking in public. He ran the nice girl's ID, and it turned out she had unpaid speeding tickets that turned into warrants. So he handcuffed her and brought her to his police car, which was hidden around the corner or something. He came back and told us he had to take her to jail. There were full-on orgies and debauchery going on inside the party, but we were the ones getting in trouble. Well, we all left the driveway of the party and went out dancing somewhere, completely ignoring the fact that our friend was in jail. I recall getting home that night and watching Anthony take his canary, Peeps, out of her cage and trying to put her in his mouth. He got her in at one point and her legs were sticking out. It was so sad. She flew out and almost got killed in the ceiling fan. We caught her and put her back into her cage, which had a miniature disco ball inside. I had put a bunch of Barbie furniture in there, a dressing table, a chair, a phone, and some other stuff, but it ended up all getting full of poo. Something kept bothering me. It was this voice. You would think it was the voice of reason, but it wasn't. It was the sound of Blake's voice. Blue collar. White trash. Split ends. No manicure. I started to worry. I thought, if I don't look good, who will want to take care of me? I will be screwed. I was barely getting by on being semi-pretty and fun. People were kind of amused by me and kind of took care of me. I knew that the worse I looked, the less likely I would have that luxury. Anthony was taking care of me at that point, and it was only because I walked around in skimpy clothes and attracted guys for him to try and sway. And I was trying to pull off that looking like a total heifer. How long could it last? I wasn't sure. I had to think about the future. I saw no value in myself whatsoever besides the possibility of being beautiful. I thought my looks would be my ticket to security. What else did I have to offer? I couldn't think of one single skill or talent or interest I had. Those thoughts were for kids in college who could choose what they wanted to do and their parents would pay for the schooling. That wasn't the way it worked for kids like me. This wasn't some fun little game where I could sit around dreaming of a career. I would literally be on the street if somebody weren't always helping me out. I had to fix things and fix them fast. I once went from a nerd to a Hollywood babe. Could I go from a puffy, trashed loser who put parking cones on her head to a beautifully groomed, feminine bombshell? I didn't quite know the rules of Encino or Sherman Oaks or wherever the hell I was. I knew that even if I studied the rules and was ready to implement them, I would need money to pull it off, and I had none. It was going to be next to impossible to change my image. But that never stopped me before.